Hello all and welcome to the third Mayborn Mentor event of this semester. I'm going to hand it off to Teresa Kushner, who will introduce our event and our panelists. Teresa?
Hi, we're so glad to have you here today. This mentor event has meant a whole lot to us as the education committee of the board, but we really want it to serve you well as well. And since I can't do justice to the two people that are on the panel, I'm going to ask Nadia and Christy to both introduce themselves, and when they do, to tell us about their very first job and what it meant to them as far as what they are starting to do in journalism. So we'll start with Nadia because it's the first one to my left.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nadia Galindo. I'm a reporter at News 12 Westchester, which is in the northern suburbs of New York City. I'm from Dallas. I'm actually from Plano, and I went to University of North Texas. My first job out of college was in Waco at KWTX, and I was an MMJ. I got the early morning shifts from like 3 a.m. to 12. I was a single mom with a 2-year-old daughter, so I was juggling that and a first job, and it was really an incredible experience. It really prepared me for my second job, which was on the border, the US and Mexico border in the Rio Grande Valley. So I'm happy to be here with you guys. I'm really happy to share my knowledge. I've been in the business for about 9 years now, and I've been in about four markets now, mostly in Texas, but now in New York, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Nadia. Hi, Christy.
Hello. Shout out to the Selena background, Roy. My name is Christy Gonzalez, and I am the general manager and president of KView in Austin, Texas. We're the ABC affiliate. And actually right now, I am the interim general manager at a second station in Tyler, Texas, KYTX. So if you guys are looking for a job, you know who to holler at. My first job, I did actually internships when I was in high school at a TV station, and that's kind of where I fell in love. But my first real paying job in television was at 19 at the PBS station in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I'm from. And at that, I learned production and everything behind the scenes. I did not go in front of the camera because at that point, internships were not paid and I had to pay my rent, my bills. So my career wound up taking me behind the scenes in production and editing and marketing. And because of that, I became a general manager at 35. So I'm so thankful that I started in that area. It wound up being a really great thing for me.
So before you leave, Christy, can you just sort of tell us what a general manager does? I mean, that's a position we might need to know more about.
Sure. And Teresa, I actually get that question a lot because I think I don't look like your average general manager who is usually a Caucasian male, probably in his 50s or 60s, right? And so because I look a complete opposite of that, people were like, what do you actually do? What does your title mean? So the whole entire TV operation is underneath me, from news content to the sales section of that. And of course, on the sales and revenue side, we sell more products than just our news. We sell different platforms. We sell OTT advertising. We sell social advertising. We make commercials for people, but our biggest money maker is the news product. So when I think about where I spend my time, it's on content and revenue and people.
Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, now you guys, if you're out there in the mentee world, if you need to ask anything, we have you can ask your questions in the chat, and we'll just position them to Christy or to Nadia or both of them, and so that they can answer. But we will have a Q&A session at the end of this too. So the next question that I have for you guys is, looking back on your careers, very short, haven't not huge long ones yet, but on your career, what would you tell your 21-year-old self that you think that person should know that you didn't learn until this point in time? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. The biggest thing I think that I didn't realize when I first started out, and really took years to realize, is that it's okay to make mistakes. And actually those mistakes are really crucial for you to grow as a journalist. In Waco, I mean, when you start out, you're not going to be who you are when 10 years later. You have to, as far as being on TV, you have to work on your voice, you have to work on, your delivery, your appearance, and most importantly, your writing and your execution of crafting the story. So, I mean, I made mistakes going live. My stories weren't really well rounded. Had to work on my photography as an MMJ. And I made so many mistakes. I'd beat myself up. I would lose sleep over it. And I didn't really see the value in making those mistakes. By making those mistakes, it prepared me to not make them again. And some mistakes you make multiple times. But this is really kind of one of those businesses in my eyes that you learn by doing, and mistakes are part of that process, which is really why there's really great value in starting in a small market. A lot of people, you're living in Dallas, you're in market 5, you think you can start in market 5, and that's really not the best route. I started in Waco, a small market, made lots of mistakes, even on the border, made lots of mistakes. And from there, I was able to go to a station in Austin, and Austin's a really great market and hard to get into at that. So making those mistakes in those smaller markets prepared me to become that journalist that can make that jump. So my advice to my 21-year-old self is make mistakes, don't beat yourself up, just learn from them.
Yeah, and I would tell 21-year-old Christy a lot of things, but one of the main lessons I would have told myself back then is to dream bigger, because I didn't have the foresight to realize that I could be a general manager and I could do it a lot faster than I thought. And so every step along the way, as I've hit some of my dreams and they're coming true, I'm like, wow, imagine if you saw yourself doing this at 21, how would that have changed where I spent my time? I actually have a painting degree. And so it's a wonder that they let me run a business with financials and everything else when I studied painting in college. My minor was journalism. It's what I like to do for fun. So those, really sitting down and thinking about your future and the path for yourself. I just did not think long-term enough, about where I want to be and what I could do. So you might surprise yourself if you just start to dream bigger. Leave your dreams right now, rip them up, and then put something bigger on paper, and you'd be surprised at what happens.
I have a really a question, because I listened to both of you, and Nadia, you talked a little bit about when you started, you had a child and everything that you had to manage. That's got to be a big barrier. And Christy, you mentioned that, you couldn't afford to take the intern jobs in front of the camera because they weren't paid. Those are obstacles, pretty significant obstacles. So tell me, what trait that you think you have that got you over those obstacles, that was the most important one? That wasn't on your list.
Okay. I actually have a story that relates back to my time at UNT. There was a professor, Nan Goplerud, who I grew up watching on Channel 8. She was an amazing reporter, always did really human interest stories. I really admired her. Actually, when I went to the session before you start college to meet people, Nan was there. My mom was like, oh my God, that's Nan Goplerud, that's Nan. So anyways, there was a point where I was ready to drop out from school because it was just so hard being, at the time I was in an abusive relationship and I was trying to get out of it. And I was also juggling a job. I was living on my own and had, at the time, almost 2-year-old daughter. And I went to Nan and I was in tears and was just like, I can't do this anymore. I don't think I can finish my degree. This is just too hard. And she gave me some really tough love advice that really woke me up. And she said, Nadia, you're not going to be the first single mom or the last single mom to pursue a career. So basically, I don't remember the exact words, but she was like, if you don't do this, you only have yourself to blame. You have yourself, you're the only one that can pick yourself up out of this and pursue something better. And it really woke me up, like, I can blame all of these circumstances in my life. I'm paying rent. I'm a single mom or about to be a single mom. I'm trying to get my life in order, but it's really up to me to make that life happen, right? So I did. I stopped feeling sorry for myself and finished my degree and got a job and moved myself and a 2-year-old child to a different city with no family and got a job, a morning job, and had to get 2 babysitters. You know, I making $7.25 an hour on food stamps, and I made it. You just have to stop making excuses for yourself and lean on the people that can help you, but also lean on yourself and believe in yourself. And those struggles have really made me the person I am today. And if I had to go back and do it again, I'd do it again, because those were really important, you know, moments in my life.
That's a great story. How about you, Christy?
Um, I'm making faces because I can't believe how much we have in common, Nadia. So that being said, there's a little bit of fate being sprinkled into this right now. If anybody else is going through things like we did, while I am not a mother, in college I was married the whole time, and I found myself in an abusive relationship as well. So what I had a similar battle to where I had to get out of that relationship, needed a job right after I graduated, and was just kind of putting the pieces back together of my life at that point, because what I dreamed of to that point was not happening. And in fact, you know, I was going through a divorce at 23, and then my little brother died right afterwards. And this is right after I graduated. So when most people are thinking about starting their lives, my life felt like it was over. And I still tell this story and I tear up sometimes, so please forgive me, because even though that's more than, you know, that's 20 years ago, you might go through some things that are life-changing. And like part of that dream bigger advice is just because if you can visualize yourself on the other side of that, like getting through such amazing things, the life you can live after things that you thought ruined your life is just really, really spectacular. Like if I could imagine where I am now, like living out so many dreams, it would have been so encouraging to myself. But it's really resiliency. And, you know, I think part of the reason why I am where I am, like what Nadia was saying, was just because I went through that stuff. And if you are battle tested in your personal life, your career all of a sudden becomes easy because you know what you can make it through, you know? So that, Nadia, you got me.
Yeah, you guys, those were great answers. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was wonderful. Now I'm going to change it a little bit and make it a little
Good.
easier. Tell me the one thing that you love most about your job.
I can start. I mean, there's so much. Like the best part of my job now is people. It's the team that you get to work with, the mentoring, the nurturing, seeing talent grow and improve in what they do, and then just having amazing people around you. I've worked in some newsrooms where there are a lot of egos and yellers, and now that I'm the boss, those people do not get to work at KView. So you can build a culture and stack it with the kind of people who just make the world brighter to come to work with and do huge stories like the storm that we just went through, or you know, when Austin had the bombings. Like those are the people that you want to run into battle with. And so I love my team here in Austin.
That's great. Nadia?
Sorry, I couldn't get myself off mute. I agree with a lot of that. I also like, and this is so cliche to say, people say they want to be there to write the first draft of history, but it really is so cool to be in that front seat, seeing things happen and being the person who gets to disseminate that information, and people know what they know because of you. It's such an honor. It's a huge responsibility, but because of this career that I chose, I've gotten to see so many amazing things, been on the front lines of so many stories on the border, the surge of, you know, undocumented immigrants coming from Central America. Like I was there, I was reporting on it. I was meeting those people that were being released by ICE and dropped off at bus stations and going to other parts of the country. You know, I was there when Trump went to the border and got to do a story on Trump's visit to the border. I got to meet Bernie Sanders when he was an unknown candidate, running the first time for president. I reported that night when Trump won. I was there in, the Democratic committee or whatever in Austin as the results were coming in, and they thought they had it in the bag and they didn't. I mean, and then here in New York, covering totally different politics and working in Austin, covering, a majority Republican legislature to a majority Democratic legislature, covering different issues on women's rights that are completely opposite to Texas. So it's just really amazing, and the kind of the wealth of knowledge that you get to develop by being there personally and knowing these leaders and getting to know their politics and being the person to cover those stories and make relationships with those people to break stories, and then also being there in the most terrible moments of people's lives, being there when someone's watching their house burn down, being there after somebody lost a family member that was murdered, going to courts and covering trials of unimaginable things that people do to each other, being there in those most vulnerable moments and watching people cry over things. I mean, it's just, I can't believe that's my job. That's my job, to meet these people and tell those stories. And it's such a cliche thing to say, but really it's just amazing to be part of the group of people who don't always get it right, but strive to get it right. And their job is to write that first draft of history.
That's fantastic. Well, here's another question for you, for all of these mentees that are still in UNT. What one thing do you think you should have learned more or better when you were in the school?
Finances, accounting. Yeah, I'll just, for anybody who has any inkling of going into management, that would have helped me.
So a few management courses in the business school?
Balance out those drawing, those metalworking, ceramics classes with a little bit of pen to paper would have been a good thing for me.
That's interesting. Nadia?
So I'm trying to remember the course that I took. It's a law media studies class. I'm trying to think of the name of it. I took at UNT, and I can't remember the man's name who teaches it, if he's still there. But I think it's so important to understand like past cases, and because like you cover a lot of court stories, you cover a lot of, and also like ethics. I wish I would have paid more attention on these in these classes, because when you're working out in the field, you really have to be a lot of times the moral compass on like what's appropriate and what's not. Of course, you have your team to like your news director and your assistant news director, but depending on the market, you might not have so much support depending on the newsroom you work in, especially those smaller newsrooms. I feel in my experience, less support from upper management to help you make those decisions. So it's really important that you understand what the ethics are as a journalist, and also kind of like the laws and past cases that can help you with your reporting. There was something else I was going to say that I wish I would have learned. I mean, I honestly felt really prepared leaving the Mayborn School of Journalism. And this is not just because I'm speaking to you through the Mayborn School of Journalism. I really felt prepared. When I went to Waco, I knew how to shoot, I knew how to write, I knew how to edit. I understood the different roles in the newsroom. I had the basic things I needed to start. Then you have to grow from there. You're not going to get all the knowledge there. You have to go and build upon those things. But I've worked in newsrooms where people come from schools that have journalism departments, and they don't know the first thing about really what, journalism writing and, those kinds of things. So I felt really prepared on at least the basic skills to get that first job.
That's great. So I'm going to open it up to the rest of the mentees here to ask you guys questions now, and I'll come back in at the end with a few of my own. So
we have a question from Marcus Sykes. He says, I was contacted by a news director for an interview last week. When the date came for the interview, she emailed me and said that something had come up. She needed to reschedule for this week and asked what days and times I was available. Yet I haven't heard back from her. Have I received the brush off and should I forget about this opportunity? Can you guys help with that?
Good question. And I love coaching on this, Marcus, because that is completely normal. If you observe a news director in their natural habitat, there's 100 emails waiting to be unanswered. There's breaking news that can pop off at any moment. There's corporate responsibility, and there's a staff of people who may or may not be behaving very good at any moment, right? So never, I took it personal a few times when an executive didn't email me back. And my advice is like, don't be annoying, but feel free to just, put yourself back at the top of their inbox. You may be somewhere on their list, but don't let it affect your confidence in any way. It probably has nothing to do with you, but gently get back at the top of their list, or, hey, did you fill this job? Yeah, I'm still here, still interested. And just don't take it personal. That's a good question.
I think Christy's more the expert on that. So I would take her advice. Because I've been on the receiving end, what like you're going through, Marcus, which by the way, Marcus is one of the students that I've worked with for the past few years, mentoring him. I think, that's happened to me in the past where I've been pushed off, but if they've set up another date, I would feel pretty good about it if they're pushing it forward to another date. So, but I would stick with Christy's advice.
Do we have any other questions? You guys can unmute yourself, I think, can't they, Karina? Yeah.
Teresa, can I talk about diversity for a quick second, management?
I'd love for you to do that. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Because that was one of my questions. I wrote that down.
Okay, perfect. So if anyone wants to come off mute, so I hold the top job in a local TV station. How many by percentage women do you think there are in the country that hold a general manager position in a TV station? Give me a percentage.
3%.
I was like 5%.
Roy, are you saying 3? Jocelyn said 5. Okay. Joshua, Areli, Caitlin says less than 5. Okay, so you guys are good. Okay, we're going even lower, but the fact that your perception is that it's less than 10 is not good. It's actually around 20%. So only 20% of people running TV stations are females. Let's do another one. Pop quiz. People of color, and I'm talking, the whole span. So any sort of minority, running television stations in the country, English language. What percentage 5%. Do you think that is? 5. What else?
7%.
I'll say 4.
4. Adeli says 20 in the chat. Emma says 9. Caitlin says 10. Another 10%. Corian, I so want to know if I'm saying your name right. Chris says 30. Marcus was actually right. It's 7%. It hovers between 7 or 8%. So if you're like me and you're a Latina and you're on a TV station, statistically, it's like there might be a handful of us, like less than 5 in the country, which is crazy. And the reason I share that is just because we need more diversity in management. And so many times people of color go into on-air roles and then they plateau there, and in their career we don't see a lot of that filter into management. So I just encourage you guys, yes, get your first job, do the reporting thing, do all that, but don't hold yourself back. If you want to run a newsroom one day, or if you want to run a TV station, like we need more talented people of color rising through the ranks. Those numbers are not what they should be. They do not reflect our audience, and they should. It's good for business if our management also reflects our audience, and it doesn't right now.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any other questions of Nadia or Christy?
I have a question going on that diversity. What is the percentage of either blind, like myself, or disabled members working in television across the country?
So Marcus, I'm going to put a link in the chat. There is a professor named Bob Papper at Newhouse at Syracuse who tracks this data. I don't know if data around people with disabilities or different abilities is tracked at all. I'm not sure, but I'm going to put the link in there so that you can dive deeper in there. I will tell you, I've only run into a handful in my career, and I'd like to see more too.
It's a good question, Marcus. Thank you. Any other questions, guys? Okay,
Yes, I have one.
good.
So Christy, would you recommend starting off as a reporter to get into management, or is it possible to do it behind the scenes if you're not wanting to be in front of the camera, then work your way up to management?
So really great track on the content side is to start off as a producer.
Hmm.
So, and by the way, there's a great need for producers always. It's a thankless job, but if you can stack a show and make a show sing and keep people tuned in after the first quarter hour, I mean, producers are worth their weight. And actually there's a push in the industry to pay them more, which is totally, completely a great thing to do. So imagine being a producer, you know, whatever size market, you work your way up, and then that EP role goes easily into assistant news director to general manager. So there's a very clear path, and sometimes a lot easier than going the reporter track to get into management. And some of that has to do with pay too, because a lot of times in some markets, well, historically, like on air will get paid more than behind the scenes. But behind the scenes has an opportunity to jump into management sooner. So you might be like Nadia is in the #1 market in the country, right? That's where you start to get way better salaries if you're in top 10, top 5. But if you're a producer and you become an EP, like your salary is going to start to get up there and climb just as fast. And you don't have to have the perfect hair, face, and voice and stay skinny for your whole entire life, right? Like if you're behind the scenes, thank goodness. It's a lot, like being on air is, you know, it's tough. It's a lot of pressure. Nadia can speak to that a lot more than I can.
And I just want to add that out of all the markets I've been in, I only had one manager, my current manager, who actually was on air. The majority, from my understanding, the majority of management GMs, they are people who came from behind the scenes. My news director was on air reporter and anchor and worked her way into a management position, but that's not the norm. That's really, I think, an exception.
I have a question for both of you, and I'll start with Nadia. When you consider your career, where you are now, and where you want to be, what would you consider you want to say is your contribution? What do you want to be remembered for?
That's a tough one. I want to be remembered as a storyteller. I want to be remembered as somebody who told important stories. You know, everybody has this idea to get like to the top market, or, you know, I think that's not everybody's dream. It's to get somewhere where they feel comfortable, or, you know, for me, I really like where I am right now. I'm in a market where I have the opportunity to tell community stories, since I'm at a cable station that covers a section of the New York City market. But I want to be remembered for telling good stories and for telling stories that were important. You know, I cover a lot of immigration stories. That's kind of like, actually, I'm doing one today. You know, when they find an immigration story, they give it to me because they know I worked on the border. But these are like untold stories. I did a series in 2019 about undocumented people and the struggles they go through. And these are stories that don't make the A block. They don't, you know, they're not covered very thoroughly because, you know, they're undocumented and they don't have voting power, and, you know, people don't pay attention to them as much. But I bring that to the table, and that goes back to the whole diversity thing, because my dad was an undocumented immigrant, and, you know, I'm half Mexican. Those stories resonate with me, and I understand their importance to this section of the community, which is really a large section of the community. So yeah, I want to be remembered for telling those important stories.
Great, thank you. And Christy?
One of my mentors in really my career sponsor in the Disney company told me, as you climb, lift. And I've really adopted that because as my career's grown, it's like, how many people can I bring along with me? And she specifically said, you know, especially when I got the GM job, like, I need you to mentor women and people of color, do what I did for you to other people. And so that is a very, like, for me, that's a very personal mission, that, you know, in the next 10 years, I want to have more opportunity to help place women and people of color in positions of leadership, just to help diversify, right? Like our world. And then I also think too, is the lasting impact. We get to work in a field that gives you that lasting impact. So I grabbed from over here. Oh, come on, you gotta show up. This is our cave view. Oh, hold on, let me do this. Let's stop this virtual background mess.
The virtual background is knocking it out. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
So this is our cave view. It's really our strategy plan, but right here, the Make Austin Better, like that's kind of our mission. And so the fact that we get to do that as a TV station, like improve the community we work in, that's what we're going to be remembered for. Did KView divide or did it make the community better? Like we have some real issues in Austin around affordability and even traffic and things like that. So if we point our megaphone at those issues, we can really make an impact.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Questions, guys? This is your opportunity to ask these two amazing women.
There's a question in the chat from Joshua Carter. It says, is it easier to find employment if you're willing to work the overnight shift or those weird hours?
And Joshua, if you're able to come off mute, can you tell me what kind of jobs you're looking at in the beginning?
Yes, I was, I guess just looking at trying to get my foot in the door with broadcasting, working overnight, because I've always worked an overnight shift in every job that I've had. So I don't know what it's like to work during the day. That's why I was just wondering if it was easier to get an overnight or those weird hours I see some journalists work.
Are you thinking reporting, producing, production?
Reporting and production, both of those aspects.
Okay. So I would say yes, absolutely, right? Like, so any sacrifice you're willing to make in broadcasting puts you in front of the pack. But one of the biggest ones is, as Nadia was saying, is going to a smaller market and cutting your teeth there. So being willing to move is real. I would say that's even more of a thing that helps over what shift you're willing to work.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely willing to move.
I just want to add to that. When I got my first job in Waco, I got very lucky that it was 2 hours away from Dallas, from Plano, where I lived. But I applied across Clyde and Idaho. I applied Michigan. You know, we were still sending out 2012, if you can imagine, we were still sending out DVDs of our reels at that time. But I applied everywhere. I was willing to move as a single mom with my daughter anywhere in the country. And then when I finally got the job offer in Waco, it was a 3 a.m. to noon shift, which is completely not desirable, especially with the kid. And I did that for 9 months before I got my second job. And I got lucky to get a Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. job, which is really incredible. Not have to work weekends on a second job. But you really have to be willing to take what they offer. You know, in the beginning, it's more about the experience versus your comfort. And as you become better, I think that you have more weight to ask for those better shifts.
That's fantastic.
And I have a little tip there too. You know, each company has their own website for recruiting and things like that. But if you want to stay in Texas, the company I work for, which is called Tegna, which is Bennett and Gilo. Bennett and Gilo, that's hilarious. I switched them up. Bennett and Bilo. Hang with me. That is a modern day TechNet, and we owned 11 TV stations now in Texas, and many of them are smaller market. So if you want to stay in the state, but not be that far from Dallas or Denton, you know, there's Midland, Odessa, there's Tyler, there's Waco, and it's like one-stop shop. So check out the Techno website. I'll put it in the chat as well.
Thank y'all so much.
And I have something I wanted to add, the importance of joining organizations. And I'm sure Christy can probably talk about this as well. I'm a member of NAHJ, and I've gone to tons of conferences, many of the NAHJ conferences that have also partnered with NABJ. And NAHJ is the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. There's so many journalism associations that you can join. There's one for the NLGJA, which is for gay, lesbian, transgender. There's, you know, for Asian, Black, Native American. There's SPJ, the Society of Professional Journalists. I mean, there's a place for everybody. And they all hold conferences where you can go and do these workshops, which I did when I was a student. They have career fairs, which you can go and hand your resume to people, which is a great opportunity not only to get feedback, but also apply for jobs across the country. They have booths for each of the stations, Meredith, Tegna, Sinclair, all of them are there at these kinds of conferences. And then also it's a great place to meet other journalists who are either looking for jobs or have jobs. And a lot of times it's who you know, not what you know. Meeting that person, that's how I got my job in the Rio Grande Valley. Is I actually had a friend that I met at UNT who was also a journalism major, and she was working on the border and they had an opening, and she took my resume and put it in front of the news director. And that's how I got the top of the stack and got the interview and got the job. So going and making those connections can be just as important as getting a degree. And if not more so, because those connections can introduce you to those people that hold the power to give you those jobs. So I would highly, highly recommend, if you haven't already done so, to join an organization and try and make, you know, a conference at one point.
That's great.
I do a lot of recruiting at those conferences. And so again, I'll remind, a lot of times on-air people will heavily consider them, but producers won't. And we're just as hungry for good producers as we are for good on-air talent.
That's fantastic. You guys have been really great about advice. And I'm sure all of the mentees on the call really appreciate that. But now your last question is, tell me, what was the most important piece of advice that you got when you started your career that you think is worth sharing with this team?
Nadi, do you want to go first?
I'm trying to think, because I already told you the advice that Nan gave me. That was, to me, like the best advice that picked me up and got me going and continuing the career. I thought I wrote something down. Yeah, I just think you have to, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question right. I think you need to knock on every door. You have to stop. Don't feel like you don't deserve something. Like, you have to really know your worth and go out there and knock on every door. Don't pester people, but make sure you're persistent. And also stand up for yourself. Like, once you do start your career, I would say my second job, there were situations where my news director kind of walked all over me and did things that, you know, embarrassed me, and I didn't stand up for myself, and I didn't know how. But I think there's an importance to be vocal about your needs. And I mean, I never took vacation. I never used my sick days. I was so scared of like losing, you know, status at my jobs. So I think it's important to remember to stand up for yourself and know your worth, and also value your mental health, because in those small markets, you're going to be doing so much work. You're going to be overloaded. When I was on the border, I was doing like 2 packages. I was calling police stations and fire stations for 2 counties before my shift even began. I was collecting information, writing like 4 VOs, getting VOSOTs. I was really overworked and my mental health suffered. And I didn't know how to stand up for myself and say, like, these things are not humanly possible. So I think it's important to find a way to balance that.
That's great advice. Thank you. Christy?
Nadia just reminded me of a piece of advice that I learned mid-career for myself, which was interview your boss as much as they're interviewing you. Because of all of my stops, there was, and I was in management, there was a general manager who I had known to be somewhat micromanaging and late with decisions, which makes your job harder in some cases. And it's not that her style was bad, or it was that I know how I like to be managed, and that's not going to bring out the most successful Christy. And so I should have not taken that job because of that. And I didn't. So, that was one move where I was like, that wasn't the best thing for me to do. And I took it because it was a promotion, but it wasn't a good fit. And so that's one piece of advice. And then I'm just going to tell you guys about a transition I made. And am I going over on time right now?
We're fine. We're fine.
Okay, good. So I had a lot of lessons to learn when I went from Albuquerque, which I think is now Market 46, somewhere around there. I don't remember where it's gone. And I was a promotion producer, but not very experienced in Albuquerque. And I went to market number 4, Philadelphia. They hired me because of my editing chops and my reel looked good. But meanwhile, I didn't actually know how to do the whole entire job. That's another story. The point is, when I got there, I was a very artsy kid from a very, like, New Mexico is called Land of Mañana. Like, it's so chill. Like, your business acumen in New Mexico is not really sharpened. Anybody been there? Like, it's very different culture than East Coast. So I get in Philadelphia. Now I'm around sharks, Market 4. These people are amazing and so professional. And I'm like wearing weird clothes. And, I don't know if I had taken my piercings out yet or not. I have no idea. I don't remember back then. I have tattoos, I show up and I'm like, what's going on? And boss brings me in 6 months into the job. And he says to me, Christy, do you know what people are talking about when it comes to you? And I'm like, no, because I don't care. What? No. Why would I care? And he said, they're talking about the way you look. And I was like, what? It was Teresa, I made that face when he gave me that advice, but it was one of those moments where you're like, I don't necessarily agree with what this person is doing and how they're doing, but I'm going to take the advice and I'm going to run with it because he's telling me what I need to do to be successful in this organization. And so I had to wake up and realize that I was in a very political organization. There was a look that would help you get ahead, right? It's not, and I thought to myself, if that's what they need is for me not to dress artsy and creative and to be whatever, and that's what I need to do to be successful in this organization, I know I can still be me at my core and still have my personality. But if I wear different clothes, fine, whatever. Let's just do it, run for it. And that kind of hard knock, don't necessarily agree with it. I coach people sometimes because you'll have some managers that you just totally disagree with. The part you need to listen to is what they're telling you to be successful in that place, right? So they're giving you those clues. And that was the good part of it that I eventually figured out how to navigate. And it helped me honestly, like, navigate some of the politics that I think I was a little raw and edgy for. Well, I mean, come on, I went to art school. You can do whatever you want. People were like literally walking around naked in the school I went to because those are the people that you paint. So I wasn't really ready for like buttoned up, the television, super professional Disney world that I walked into. So any questions on that? Because I made a few mistakes, y'all.
You look like an artist today. You look very professional. So you've made that transition very well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I had to polish it up, I'll be honest. And so I figured out how to do that eventually.
Yeah, I would have never guessed painting major ever.
Right, exactly.
That would not have been
or like tons of tattoos. And yeah, you would not be, you wouldn't know now. Yeah, I was a very artsy kid, so I did whatever I wanted.
That is a great one. If there are not any other questions, we want to.
We have a question in the chat from Marcus Sykes. He says, how often should you move markets?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, contracts are about 2 to 3 years. So if you want to move every time your contract's up, that's kind of the norm. My first market, I didn't have a contract. And when I started to leave, they tried to make me get one. I was only there for 9 months. The norm is to have a contract, and it's different with producers. I think some markets give producers contracts, some don't. My first market didn't give me a contract until I started to leave, but I left my first job. Everybody's going to be different. Your path is going to be different. Some people make bigger jumps. Some people make smaller jumps. I went from 9 months to a 2-year contract on the border in the Rio Grande Valley. And then I went from there to Austin to another 2-year contract. Then I came here to New York, where I freelanced at News 12 Long Island before getting a full-time job here in News 12 Westchester. And I've been here for 4 years, in May. And I have no plans of leaving at this point. So, and I don't have a contract, but I could leave if I wanted to. So it's just really like, where do you want to end up? And when you get there, I mean, you're obviously going to stay there for a while. If Dallas is where you want to go, you got to make those steps to get back to Dallas. If you're going to, go to Waco or Lubbock or Odessa, wherever you start off. And it's really, some places, if you go and say you're a producer and you get that promotion to executive producer or assistant news director or whatever, then it's worthwhile to stay longer and get that experience, right? So everybody's story is going to be a little bit different.
Jocelyn asked in the chat, do you find it hard to balance your personal life with your professional one? And I would just say in general, like our line of business is not the best business to go into if you want all your weekends free and normal hours and to go early to a happy hour. This is probably, you might want to go hang out with the marketing kids in the business school. This might not be the best place. But that being said, it makes it easy to do this job when you're so passionate. Like both Nadia and I shared how passionate we are about what we do in the community and the stories we get to tell. So I have dove in 100% into my professional life because it doesn't feel like work. I love it, right? But I will say that I learned a lot during COVID. Like I don't need to be at events 2 to 3 times a week, right? Like representing KVU. And so I started cooking again. And, I learned a lot from this last year, which I will take with me. And my staff has not, they've been able to eat their lunch or take a walk on their lunch or just leave their desk because they're not at their desk, they're at home. And those things I want to make sure we take forward after COVID, because we weren't necessarily doing a good job of that before. So every year you can choose to improve or you can choose to get burnt out. And you're the only one who controls that. And as my mentor said once, there are different seasons in life and you have different buckets. And some buckets during some seasons will be more full than others. There might be time when you have young children that you're slowing down in your career, right? But then they're in high school and you ramp it back up. And so you are in charge of that and you get to pick your seasons and pick which buckets are full.
Great advice.
I want to add on that, like Chrissy said, the burnout. This is a career that a lot of people don't do for very long because they realize how hard it is. If your goal in life is to have a family and have 5 kids. I mean, I know someone who's done that. There's an anchor in Waco, Lindsay Lipman, who worked in Austin with me, who has 4 kids. And she's remarried and she's the anchor at the station. So it can be done, right? I myself actually just had a baby in September and I'm back at work now. So I have an 11-year-old child. And then now I remarried and I have a newborn and I'm here at work and had probably 4 hours of sleep last night because she's going for teething. So you can find a work-life balance. It also depends on where you want to go. If you want to work at CNN, I don't know how that's going to be conducive to doing what I'm doing, right? Because those reporters, producers, they are like around the clock working. I have a friend who's a photographer at CNN and he's actually in the White House. He's covering when Trump was there, now with Biden. And this guy works all the time. And unfortunately, his relationship with his girlfriend has suffered because of it. So For me, I'm at a local cable station and I'm lucky to have a 9 to 6 job, which is not always 9 to 6, right? When snow coverage happens, which we've had a lot this year, you can work really long shifts. You can work doubles. You can be asked to work weekends, which I have been asked. Even though my shift is 9 to 6, my shift isn't, it's not a solid 9 to 6 because you have to be willing to move around. But I'm lucky that I have a supportive husband who will help, I have the burden shared. So it's like a lot about who you choose to be with, and if they're supportive of you having this crazy schedule and it consuming a lot of your home life too, because I'm always looking for story ideas when I'm home. I'm answering emails, I'm taking phone calls for tips for stories. So it just really, where do you want to be? And you'll make those decisions, you know, if you want that work life balance and want to have a family and all that kind of stuff. So it just really depends on you to make that happen, I think.
There's one more question here in the chat from Rachel. What is the one mistake you made early in your career that you learned the most from?
That's a good one. I'm trying to think of a good, oh, I have one that happened later. Are you guys okay? I mean, it's a good story, Rachel. I didn't handle the situation very well. And I had an anchor at one of the places I worked at who is a very famous anchor who I felt bullied by. And as try as I was to help this person, in my view, I thought it was helping her. There came to a point where she didn't show up to a very tightly scheduled shoot that I had, and she blamed me. And I felt that that was really unfair. And I went in the newsroom and we started arguing with each other. And I called her the D word, diva, in front of the whole room. And let me tell you, that did not go well for me. She tried to get me fired. She went to the GM, she went to HR, she did everything. And this whole, for me, I make mistakes of reacting in emotion sometimes. And the times when I have been upset and handled my emotion well, I've literally had to leave the building and walk away and chill out and give it a few hours before I react. And at that point, I was not ready to do that. And so I'm telling you guys that story so that if you have emotional, strong reactions, you just leave and get out of there before you call somebody a diva and they try to get you fired.
Good advice.
I have a story, and I don't know if you can take from it what you want. In one of the markets I worked in, I was covering elections, and we had gypped the competitor station on the previous election race, and he was the longstanding DA. And the other station was trying to get him away from me to go live with him first before I could go live. And my news director knew that. So she made me stand by longer just so they couldn't get him. And then when I went live, so anyways, my next election, the person I was covering was the sheriff race, and I was covering the one who ended up winning. And so the other station was trying to do to us what we did to them. They were holding on to him and trying to keep us from going live with him because they had him right next to them. And my news director was telling me to go over in front of them and just start asking him questions while they're standing by waiting to go live. And I didn't know what to do because this was kind of catty. It was childish. It was not my decision. It was my news director at the time. And she's screaming at me on the phone to just go stand in front of them and start asking him questions. And I felt very uncomfortable doing that because they didn't do that to me when we did that to them the first time. And so I didn't do it. I just told her, I'm sorry, when they're done, I'll grab him. I'll let you know when I'm standing by. And after that night, after we went off air at, I don't know, 11 or whatever it was, we had a Zoom meeting. And she basically chewed me out in front of everybody and said how, if you want to be a reporter, you have to have the balls to do those kinds of moves. And I didn't stand up for myself. I just sat there and took it. And after that, I left soon after that. I wish looking back that maybe I would have stood up for myself a little more. I don't know if I was in the wrong. Maybe Christine, you can add some perspective to the situation, but it was a really tough situation and it really impacted me. I really felt, you know, shaken by the whole experience. And I kind of wish looking back that I would have stood up for myself in that situation.
Your managers need feedback. Your managers are not always going to make the right decisions and the right calls. And that was clearly like that person got what they deserved, but they blamed you, which is not fair. And so I say in those situations, look, it's kind of like how you handle bullies. Like sometimes when you call them out and you show them like, hey, I'm going to be transparent about this situation. We did that to them this year and they were returning the favor. And I didn't feel like it was right for me to do anything else, but to take what we did to them as well. You know, I'm sorry you're upset by that. And you can do it in a calm manner, but your managers need feedback. And sometimes, you know, if they're doing that to you in front of a room, like if you can respond back in calm, I say go for it. Because managers are not perfect people. And first of all, I don't believe in, and this is where I went wrong in my situation, I don't believe in punishing people or yelling at them in front of other people. If you make a mistake, you should do that in private. You should pull that person aside and talk to them. That is not for the whole group to hear, unless your style of management is intimidation and rule by authority, which I'm not a fan of. So yeah, speak up for sure. And if they are jerks, get out of there.
Great. I can't tell you guys, I am sure the mentees feel the same way. This was an incredible panel. Thank you so much for being so honest with the answers to your questions. I'm quite sure everyone appreciated that. We surely appreciate your time. We know that that's an hour out of your day, and we know how busy you are now because we have all of this information. So good luck for your career, and thank you very much for being part of this program.
Thank you guys. I put my LinkedIn there, so feel free to connect or follow me on Twitter. It's Christy Gonzalez, I think, on Twitter.
Big thank you to
Thanks for having me.
Christy and Nadia, who really are awesome, and we really appreciate you guys. Big thank you to Teresa, who moderated the conversation today. And these will be available on recording. We're going to put them up on our YouTube, so you should have those in the near future as well. Thank you. And we hope to see you at one of our other Mayborn Mentor events happening later this semester. Thanks.
Bye, guys.